I used to think that the path to wealth was a straight line, but I've realised it's actually three distinct mindsets. And most people actually, I think, get stuck in the first one. So for years, I was firmly a saver. It felt safe, but here's the issue with that strategy. Safety doesn't build wealth, and in fact, if your only strategy is saving, you are slowly going to be broke because inflation is eating your money faster than the bank can pay you interest. And I realised that I had to evolve. I went from saver to investor, and now I'm making the terrifying jump to owner. If you feel like you're doing everything right, but you're still capped on time and or money, you need to see which stage you're stuck in and how to break out of it. So let's start with stage one. Stage one is all about being a saver, and it is the foundational step while also being a trap. So what I want to emphasize here is just whatever you do not try to skip this step. Everybody needs to save up money. It can be tempting to try and skip ahead and be like, oh, well, I'm not interested in saving, I just want to build wealth, I want to get rich, I want to be financially independent. But trust me, you are highly unlikely to get there without building the foundations for yourself. And there's a lot of reasons to this, and you need to get that habit. But what it boils down to is that you need to be able to spend less than you make. And that is the start for everyone, is to just be living within their means. I'll give you a really quick example of how this has been true to life for us. And my fiance Nick is very much a saver at heart, and it's a blessing and a curse. But the real value in this is something that we did or happened across when he was in his first job postgraduate, and he got a decent paying job, but he actually hated that job. And now he did something that some would say is really kind of quite irresponsible and crazy. He quit that job and he decided to go all in on just applying for grad schemes, on pathways that he really believed in and in an industry that he was very passionate for. And I didn't fully appreciate at the time what big of a step that was. I was just supportive, and we knew in our hearts it was the right thing to do, because we thought, well, what's the point of doing a job that you hate? You need to push on and try and find something that is going to give you the future that you deserve. And we took this for granted, but I now know that that was because we had already mastered step one of saving. Saving gives you an amazing level of comfort and freedom. So Nick had, at the time, probably 3 months worth of living expenses saved up from when he worked full-time before going to university. So he had already taken that step, and he had already understood the liberty that you, and the freedom and the ability to take risk that it enables. And he thought highly enough of himself to actually take that step. So what you need on this pathway to building wealth is first and foremost a safety net, because without that safety net, you're not going to go anywhere. And that graduate scheme, it worked out for him. It had about a 1 to 2% acceptance rate, and he got in. And yes, he probably had a bit of an advantage there, because he could dedicate 100% of his time over a few months to actually focusing on landing that role. But now, and since, it has paid back dividends, because he has gone from earning this much doing something he disliked to earning this much doing something that he really does enjoy, and he's been able to progress into that career very nicely. So I think, if he hadn't have had these savings behind him, it wouldn't have worked out. But obviously there are stages to this, and there are limitations to what the saver's mindset is going to do for you. So it does all of those things. It gives you that safety buffer. It builds the foundation and the habit of spending less than you make, which is, as I've already said, 100% essential. But the drawbacks, which I haven't yet dug into, the drawbacks are also quite severe. So the reality of saving is that you are never really going to be truly wealthy. Most often, by saving, you're fighting an uphill battle, which is inflation, which is the cost of living, because you are unlikely to beat inflation, so the rising cost of goods and services, through interest on your savings. And you can get savings accounts that will pay maybe a little bit more than the base rate, which is set by the Bank of England, but it is usually only going to be temporary. So just to give you a real life example, 6 months ago I opened my Chase savings account, this snazzy current account debit card in the post, and it was on a competitive rate of 4.5% interest. Fast forward 6 months and now that has dropped to 2.5%. And that is just one example. Like, all of these accounts, unfortunately, anybody knows of an account, a savings account, that consistently keeps pace with inflation and keeps giving you their best rate year over year? Let me know. I found that it is a faff, it's a hassle, and usually the admin between finding a new savings account, moving your money, often means that you do, over the long term, lose out to inflation. So it's more active than you want it to be. It's also a lot less profitable, because really, for all that effort, what is the point of just outperforming by 0.5%, if that? And this is without me even going into the personal savings allowance, because there are as well severe limitations on what you're going to be able to do with your savings outside of an ISA wrapper. And obviously, quite recently, the government as well has reduced the cash ISA allowance. But suffice to say that it's not enough. So you need to progress onto stage 2, and you need to adopt the mindset of an investor. And this completely changed my world when I started to invest 4 years ago. Obviously, you can invest in many different things, and you are the only person who can choose your investment strategy that you are comfortable with. To try and make this more accessible, I'm going to share mine. I do not gatekeep. I transparently share every single investment that I make on this channel, and you can see my portfolio updates for the full story. But I go with a index fund or ETF that is globally diversified. And this is kind of like the lazy way, but it does work. So it's how you can really solve that money problem of just hitting a brick wall and like feeling like you can't make any headway. You've got to, with saving, obviously earn more and more and more, and you've got to save more and more and more, and you've always got to live below your means, and that money doesn't keep sort of making you more and more. There's like a very clear ceiling, and you're battling with inflation and you're losing that battle. Well, when you invest in the stock market, you can very feasibly outperform that. And the example that I always use is just looking at the FTSE all cap for the past 20 years. Obviously, there's no guarantee what it's going to do going forward, but going back, we can see it's done about 10% per year on average in annual return. And with that, you know, if you are making 8% a year on average for 30 years, you 10x your money. I did a whole video on this, and this is the reason why I don't worry about retirement, because I have 50k and I know it can transform into 500,000 for me in 30 years time. So if you want to check that one out, please do. Explains this part of the process in more detail. But really, investing and putting your money into something that is going to make you more money is the second mindset. It very much isn't a get-rich-quick scheme, but it's maths and it makes sense, and it helps you once and for all solve this money problem. So if you want to have a pathway to financial independence, there it is. And by the way, most of us are investing anyway, so if you have a workplace pension, please do look into that and try and make use of it, because they are phenomenal. And if you don't understand that, then I'll link a video that might help you up there somewhere, because I think it's a very worthwhile topic to read up on, because you don't want to miss out on this, trust me. But then there's also another step beyond this, and if you really want to push your wealth building horizon, then this is kind of where I'm at now. Transitioning from the investor into an owner. Just editing the video and want to add a quick caveat. So with all of these mindsets, the thing that I failed to kind of make abundantly clear is that I believe that you always want to retain each one. You want to evolve while keeping the best movesets in your arsenal. So as a saver, everybody mastering this is going to serve you throughout your entire life. And then similarly with the investing, I am not, for example, cashing out my investment so that I can start a business. I'm keeping the savings, I'm keeping the investments, and now I am moving on to starting a business. And this isn't something that everybody is going to do in exactly the same format. Not everybody is going to want to ditch their 9-to-5 and go all in. You can be an owner in so many different ways, and technically through investing, you are already building up some ownership. So hopefully that just makes it a little bit clearer, and to see how all of these mindsets compound and build up a more complete picture of this entire process, and essentially more strings to your bow, right? That's what we always want to do, and the more opportunities to build wealth, the better, I think. So yeah, that was just a quick thing I wanted to add in here. Hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Because the reason that the stock market is so profitable and why it works to build wealth is because companies are designed to make money, and that's the whole reason why they exist. If a company wasn't profitable, it would disappear. It wouldn't be something that people would continue, because obviously these are only ever designed to make wealth. So they're also making money for their owners and not the employees, which is a really important distinction to make, because I think often if you do the traditional path and you go through the normal education, school, and then work, like I was very much in this pigeonhole as well. I was thinking from an employee mindset, and I still have to do a lot of work to try and shift and get rid of that mindset, because it does create a huge barrier to building wealth. But essentially, if you work a 9-to-5, you are allowing someone else to profit off of your expertise. You know, you do a job, the company charges this much, but they only pay you this much, and they're keeping that margin, they're keeping that profit to themselves, and that is how they do so well. Every single employee, you know, they're making a very, you know, if they're doing a good job as a company, they're making a very healthy margin from everything that they outsource, everything that they employ in someone to do. They're making money from that. And I think that moving from an investor to an owner then is about removing the cap on earnings as well. Because you can make an unlimited amount of money being an owner, but there is always going to be a upper bound to what you can pretty much command as an employee, as a professional. Like, they're only going to pay so much, you're replaceable, yada yada. If you're the owner, you put yourself in that unique position that you cannot be replaced. And also, you know, obviously it can be quite freeing because you're in charge of your time. But all of that aside, and looking purely from a wealth building perspective, how many people do you know that got truly wealthy through just doing a 9-to-5 and being an employee? And maybe it was a lot easier. You know, I do think in the past there were defined benefit schemes, these much, much better pension schemes that gave you maybe half your salary for life. Well, that's the thing of the past for most people. So, you know, ultimately this is where my drive to try and become a business owner has been born from, because I can see that the path I was going on, okay, it was fine, it was going to work, but it was going to take a long time. And I also want to be in charge of my time as well as having money, because if we've got money mastery now already, then really the final piece of the puzzle is time. Because if you're gunning for financial independence, why do you even want that in the first place? You probably want that to be able to do what you want with your time. And I'm just saying, why wait till retirement? You know, you can bring that time horizon more closely by earning more, but you can also basically bring that future dream into today by just becoming your own boss. So for me, really then, it's no longer about just being rich, it's also being time rich. There's this interesting thing that people say, which is very true, I think, that young people are usually time rich, cash poor. When you get old, it flips. So you're time poor, cash rich. And being an owner is my way to try and sort of hack that equation so that I can have my cake and eat it, if you like. And I don't even know if this business is going to work out for me, but what I do know is that it's a worthwhile goal, because if I was to keep doing my 9 to 5, then yeah, there's a predictable outcome there. Eventually I will earn my retirement, but it's really funny how you start to think differently. And if I had never saved an emergency fund, I wouldn't have started investing. And if I had never started investing, I wouldn't have started to try and build a business. So I am not trying to wait. Very long-winded way of saying I'm not trying to wait until I'm 65 to own my own time and my own life and to build a life that I really value. Something that I think I didn't really touch on would be the risk element, because as you go through this journey, you'll find that you have to take more and more risk, but you'll also realise the relationship that exists between risk and reward, because with no risk at all, you're stuck with savings and you're a saver at heart. And believe me, I've tried, I've looked, and there is no way that you're really ever going to build meaningful wealth through saving alone. You would have to work incredibly hard and forever, because you need to keep saving because your wealth is being eroded by inflation. Even with managing it really carefully, you're probably going to underperform, and especially with the restrictions on how much you're allowed to save in the UK because of the personal savings allowance and the cash ISA restrictions, which may even get worse, I don't know. But because of that, you're going to have to become a little bit more comfortable with risk, and by doing so, you can unlock some real amazing opportunities. So I hope this has been enlightening. It's been a bit of a different one for me. I've tried speaking directly from the heart and the brain and just kind of dumping it on you, but hopefully I can do some magic in the edit so that it's not so crazy unstructured, but at the same time, let me know if you found it enlightening, if you found it useful, or if you want me to go back to a more structured type of video for the next one. I would love to hear your feedback. And yeah, thanks. I'll see you in the next one.